On a crisp October morning along the Israel-Gaza border, the horizon is pierced by tall grey columns of smoke. The haze drifts silently above the northern Gaza Strip, dimming the sky and reminding everyone watching that the conflict which began 2 years ago has yet to come to an end. Today is October 7th, 2025. Across Israel, the date is solemnly marked as the second anniversary of the October 7th attacks of 2023, the assault that shattered the country's sense of security and dragged the region into 2 years of relentless war. In those first hours 2 years ago, Hamas fighters stormed across the border after a massive barrage of rockets. They struck army bases, kibbutz communities, and a crowded music festival. They took more than 200 people hostage and killed over 1,000 Israelis. The shock of that day changed the course of Israeli politics, Palestinian life in Gaza, and Middle East diplomacy. Today's anniversary is meant to honour the victims, but as cameras focus on the smoke above Gaza, it is clear that the violence has not yet been brought to a close. The very sight of the smoke becomes a stark symbol, remembrance and conflict side by side. Israeli media carries live coverage from the border. The distant skyline of Gaza is blurred by a lingering pall of dark smoke. Military officials say there have been sporadic exchanges of fire in the northern strip. No major ground operation is underway today, but tensions remain high. The Israeli government has organised memorial services across the country. In Jerusalem, families of victims light candles. In towns and kibbutzim near the border, survivors gather to remember their neighbours who were lost. At a ceremony outside the Knesset, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaks in firm tones. The October 7th attack was the darkest day in Israel's modern history. We will continue to defend our people until the threat of Hamas is removed. The words echo across a nation still haunted by the trauma of that day. Yet, even as the country mourns, there is a glimmer of diplomatic movement. In parallel with the memorials, indirect negotiations are taking place. Israeli representatives and envoys from Hamas are holding separate talks with mediators in Cairo and Doha. The United States has put forward a new peace proposal, supported by Egypt and Qatar, that seeks to bring a final end to the 2-year war in Gaza. According to diplomats, the proposal calls for a phased ceasefire, the release of the remaining hostages, the gradual reopening of Gaza's border crossings for humanitarian aid, and steps toward new governance arrangements in the territory. The plan faces resistance from hardliners on both sides, but it represents the most serious diplomatic effort since the war began. The contrast between memorial ceremonies and the continuing sounds of conflict is especially felt in towns near the border. In Sderot, a farmer tells reporters, "We want to honour our dead, but the war hasn't stopped." Every new plume of smoke reminds us that peace is still far away. In Gaza itself, the anniversary is marked not by speeches, but by daily struggle. Large parts of the north lie in ruins. United Nations agencies estimate that more than 70% of Gaza's residents have been displaced at least once during the conflict. Many live in makeshift shelters with limited access to water and medicine. Hospitals operate with dwindling supplies, and some have been damaged by fighting. Local social media posts show families standing amid collapsed buildings, holding up portraits of loved ones killed in the war. International leaders issue statements to coincide with the anniversary. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says, "We honour the victims of October 7th and reaffirm our commitment to a durable peace that ensures Israel's security and the dignity and safety of Palestinians." European and Arab leaders call for restraint and urge both sides to seize the moment for a ceasefire. For many watching the images on television, the recurring view of smoke rising from Gaza underlines how fragile that goal remains. Analysts in Washington and Tel Aviv point out that while the large-scale Israeli ground campaign slowed earlier this year, sporadic strikes and shelling continue, especially in the northern sectors where Hamas still maintains a presence. Any of these flare-ups could derail the negotiations. The sense of unfinished conflict is especially strong for the families of the hostages still held in Gaza. In Tel Aviv, hundreds gather in a square carrying photographs of loved ones. They appeal to the negotiators to put the hostages' return at the forefront of any deal. One father says to journalists, "For 2 years we have waited. We cannot mark another October 7th without them." Israel's main memorial ceremony is held at a site near the border, close to the fields where militants breached the fence in 2023. There, the names of the nearly 1,200 people killed that day are read aloud: soldiers, festival goers, kibbutz residents. A bell tolls after each name and the audience observes a moment of silence. Some weep quietly as the list goes on. Netanyahu, speaking to the crowd, repeats his government's stance. "We will not forget. We will not forgive. We will pursue peace, but only from a position of strength." The Israeli leader's remarks are broadcast live across national channels, while in the background, the AFP TV footage of Gaza's skyline continues to show the rising smoke. That image has become both a news illustration and a symbol of the unresolved conflict. Military commentators note that Israel's current strategy is to maintain pressure on Hamas while allowing space for negotiations. Analysts caution that without a sustained halt to hostilities, humanitarian conditions in Gaza will worsen, fueling more resentment and complicating any political settlement. As evening approaches, the memorial services conclude. In Jerusalem, synagogues hold special prayers. In border towns, candles glow in windows to honour the victims. But along the frontier, the sky remains streaked with the dark columns of smoke now lit by the fading sun. Journalists stationed at the border describe a tense calm. Israeli forces remain on alert. Aid convoys wait at crossing points for clearance to move into Gaza. The ceasefire discussions continue behind closed doors, but there is no public sign of a breakthrough yet. International media commentators reflect on how this conflict, which began with a shocking attack 2 years ago, has dragged on despite numerous calls for restraint. They note that the war has reshaped Middle East alliances, strained Israel's relations with some of its traditional partners, and placed the humanitarian crisis in Gaza at the forefront of global concern. For Palestinians in Gaza, the second anniversary is not just a date on the calendar, but another day of hardship. Local health officials say civilian casualties have mounted not only from direct strikes, but also from shortages of medicine and clean water. International aid groups warn that unless a durable ceasefire is reached soon, the population will continue to suffer. In Washington, officials express guarded optimism that the anniversary might create momentum for compromise, but they admit that deep mistrust between the two sides and political divisions within each camp make any deal fragile. The final images of the day show a somber borderland. The smoke over northern Gaza drifts in the evening air, glowing faintly against the lights of nearby Israeli towns. The scene reflects the paradox of the moment, remembrance of past tragedy, alongside the persistence of present danger. For Israelis, October 7th has become a day to honour the memory of those lost and to reaffirm national resilience. For Palestinians, it is a day that recalls the beginning of 2 years of destruction and displacement. For the world, it is a reminder that the search for peace in this conflict remains unfinished. As night deepens, the border grows quiet but not peaceful. Diplomats continue their shuttle between capitals. Families on both sides wait for news that may bring either renewed fighting or a step closer to ending it. And the smoke, still rising in the distance, seems to hold a message of its own, that the war's chapter is not yet closed.